Hey everyone, Derek Prall with SafeHome.org again. Today we've got a great VPN to review. It's called CyberGhost. Now this one has some great features for both novice and advanced users, as well as a few surprises we weren't expecting. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So before we get going here, I just wanted to run you through what we're going to be covering in today's video. First, we're going to be taking a look at CyberGhost Pros and Cons. Then we're going to be having a look at their day-to-day use. We're going to discuss their performance. Then we're going to check out some of their advanced features. And finally, we're going to look at how CyberGhost performs on mobile. All right, so let's quickly run through some of the great stuff about CyberGhost, and then we'll take a look at some of the not so great stuff. First, in the pros category, they have great optimization options for both streaming and P2P file sharing. This really takes the guesswork out of things if that's what you're going to be using CyberGhost for. They also support multiple protocols, including WireGuard. While what protocols you have access to depends on the platform you're using, it's really great to have options, and we're going to get more into that in just a little bit. Finally, we didn't notice any significant slowdowns when we were testing CyberGhost. Their performance is great, and that's really an important element to consider when you're purchasing a VPN. Now for the rougher stuff. First, access to a dedicated IP address is going to cost you a little extra. This probably isn't a huge deal to most folks, but there are services out there that give you access to static IP addresses right off the bat. Next, some of the functionality didn't work as well as we could have, particularly CyberGhost's ad blocker. We could get it to work on some sites, but most of the time it seemed pretty ineffective. And finally, in our tests, sometimes the program just felt a little unresponsive. We found ourselves having to restart it and, mess around with it. Sometimes the inputs didn't work exactly right. It just wasn't as seamless as we would have liked. Take that with a grain of salt, though. We're really comparing this against total perfection. All right, so now that you have an idea of what CyberGhost is all about, let's take a look at how they perform day to day. So here's what CyberGhost looks like once you have everything installed. It's a pretty standard layout. On the right-hand side here, you've got your on-off button and a drop-down menu of servers that you've connected to. On the far left, you've got your server options. You have your favorites at the top, and then a list of them, which, by the way, is pretty extensive. They operate something like 6,000 servers in nearly 90 countries. Next, you have your dedicated IP server. This is your static IP address, meaning that it's never going to change and no one's going to have access to it. This is something that you're going to have to pay extra for with CyberGhost, like we mentioned previously. It's not that much more, it's like $5 a month, but note that there are some services out there that just include this functionality. Also, the everyday user probably isn't going to need one of these, but they can be helpful in specific use cases or if you're in a country with relatively restrictive internet connections. Now, down here is something really cool. CyberGhost has a host of dedicated servers for both P2P file sharing and for streaming. But take a look at this. Each of these servers are dedicated to specific streaming platforms. Do you want to watch Comedy Central in Germany? Well, now you can. And below that, we've got some advanced and supplemental features, but we're going to get into those later. Before we talk about some of CyberGhost's higher level functionality, we wanted to pause and talk a little bit about their performance. With some services out there, you're going to notice some really significant slowdowns, particularly if you're using offshore servers. But with CyberGhost, it wasn't really too much of a problem. Yeah, if we were purposefully trying to slow things down by picking obscure servers or ones that were overly crowded, we could. But in our day-to-day use of CyberGhost, we had no problem with their performance. When we tested things, without CyberGhost, our download and upload speeds were right around 160 megs a second. That's pretty fast. When we turned on CyberGhost, though, we did notice a slight decrease in our download speeds. That went down to about 123 megs a second, but our upload speeds held pretty steady at like 150. Now keep in mind, these are point-in-time tests, And honestly, anecdotal evidence is sometimes better than the hard numbers here. In the week or so we were running CyberGhost, we really had nothing to complain about as far as speeds go. Now with that out of the way, let's pop the hood and take a look at some CyberGhost's more advanced features. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to start with some bad news. If you click on connection features, you're gonna see a list of privacy protections that will, in theory, keep you safer while you're browsing. First, we're unsure why they're all repeated twice. It's a little disconcerting. And when we put things to the test, none of it really worked too well. The ad block feature in particularly was like nearly non-functional. Now, is that gonna be your experience? We can't say for sure, but personally, we're not trusting these functions too much. Moving on though, if you click up here and go to the little gear, you can open up your preferences. Here we're gonna have access to some pretty interesting back-end stuff, but we wanted to specifically talk about protocols. If you can't tell already, I'm on a Mac, which means I only have access to two protocols, IKE v2 and WireGuard. Now, WireGuard is a relatively new protocol that a lot of services are starting to support, and this really has the potential to be the gold standard of VPN protocols pretty soon. So it's great that CyberGhost is an early adopter. So that about does it for the desktop functionality of CyberGhost. Overall, we're pretty happy with this VPN. But before we wrap up, we wanted to take a quick look at the mobile offerings. Now, the good news here is that the mobile app has the same level of functionality and performance as the desktop platform. It's literally like one-to-one. You have access to all of your servers, including those optimized for streaming, but we really wanted to draw your attention to these two options, PhotoVault and Private Browser. Now, Private Browser is pretty much just a link to DuckDuckGo, but the PhotoVault is more interesting. PhotoVault is a separate app that links up with your phone's image storage and allows you to move sensitive media over to a password-protected storage platform. And it's all local, so you're not going to have to worry about your pictures floating around out there in the cloud. So there you have it. CyberGhost is a pretty solid VPN, particularly if you're interested in streaming and torrenting. Their performance is really good, and they're user-friendly enough to not intimidate newbies while offering enough advanced features to keep experienced folks happy. There's certainly some drawbacks, like the ad blocker not working and the UI feeling a little bit clunky in spots, but overall, the good absolutely outweighs the bad here. So if CyberGhost looks interesting to you, head over to safehome.org and check out my in-depth hands-on CyberGhost review. If you want to check out more VPNs, follow this channel. And if you have specific questions or want me to review a specific VPN in the future, reach out to me in the comments below. All right, thanks a lot, guys. Stay safe out there.